séance de mai de lundi numérique. Aujourd'hui, nous avons le grand plaisir d'avoir avec nous Niccolò Dell'Unto et Paola De Rudas qui nous présenteront les travaux du Dark Lab, le laboratoire d'archéologie numérique de l'Université de Lund en Suède, avec l'intervention « Les recours à la technologie de visualisation 3D pour faciliter la pratique archéologique ». Je vous rappelle que l'intervention se déroulera en anglais, que cela durera environ 1 heure et qu'il y aura le temps à la fin de la présentation pour répondre aux questions du public. Si vous le souhaitez, vous pouvez poser des questions sur le chat de la page YouTube ou bien via Twitter en utilisant l'hashtag Landinum. Je remercie d'ores déjà Antoine Courtin qui collectera les questions que nous essayerons de traduire ensuite en anglais. Et donc, maintenant, je vais passer en anglais pour présenter nos intervenants. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this session of Lundi Numérique. We are glad to host Niccolò Dell'Unto, Associate Professor in Archaeology at the Lund University, and Paola De Rudas, PhD candidate in Archaeology at the same university. Today, Niccolò and Paola will present us the activities of the Dark Lab, the Lab of Digital Archaeology, focusing on the use of 3D visualization technology in support of archaeological practice. Just a few words about the relations existing between INHA and Lund University, because we are actually trying to build up a partnership between the two institutions. Lund University hosted me in March 2020, thank you again, for a seminar related to INHA digital activities. And actually the INHA hosts Paola De Rudas as invited researcher in the framework of the Erasmus project. So we are really happy today to present this contribution, looking forward for future collaborations. I leave the stage to Niccolò and Paola for almost an hour, and then we will have the time for a questions and answers session at the end of the presentation. I remind you that you can send your questions by using the YouTube live chat or by Twitter, adding the hashtag Londinum. C'est à vous, Niccolò et Paola. The microphone?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the presentation, Federico. And I'm going to share the screen now, so you will see the screen of my presentation. And just a second. Yes. Oh, wait. Now you could probably see my presentation, and that's great. So, again, I've been already introduced, and thank you for the opportunity of presenting our work, and of course also for the collaboration. We are really looking forward of further developing this synergy that we have. So today, first of all, as Federico already said, I'm directing the activity of the Lund University Digital Archaeology Lab, which is a national infrastructure's focus on the use of 3D technology and 3D visualization for helping or supporting or highlighting new research questions. And today we thought of structuring the presentation in 3 blocks, in a sense. So the first part will be dealing with more theoretical questions like, what is virtual reality? I mean, how much do we know about it? And then we will try to discuss about what's happened when we take the virtual dimension in the field. I mean, when we actually use this dimension as an active infrastructure or interface for discovering or for better interpreting archaeology. How does this impact our work? And then the third part will be focused on what's happened when we use the virtual dimension as a reflexive and inclusive space. So a place not just for reviewing something, but really for building up knowledge. Does this place, meaning the virtual reality, offer space for other type of data? So I would like to start this talk proposing an alternative angle of what virtual reality, or let's say the 3D experience is. And most important, what is outside the technological boundaries. So I recently came across a very interesting book edited by Eric Champion titled The Phenomenology of Real and Virtual Places, where a number of authors bring important perspective concerning the meaning, the impact, and the value of virtual worlds in relation, of course, to our life. I was particularly impressed by the article Virtual Place and Virtualized Place, which is edited or written by Bruce Jantz, in which, among many other things, he discussed the fact that virtuality happens when there is a sustained relation that creates something new. And this could be, or could happen in the material space, just as in the digital represented space. And he also discussed the fact that it became a problem, referring to the virtual spaces, when we think that all we have to do is just simulating the physical parameters and the patterns of actions or behaviors in a place. I mean, this is very often what we do. We just, acquire in 3D, and we have the monuments or the sites or the artifacts online. And this is exactly, as Jens pointed out, what we often do. Now, however, the virtual, as actually French philosophers remind us, prove of being a fecund and profound territory which has the capacity of expanding the process of creation. And also, virtual reality allows envisioning a broader and dynamic picture of the past, where multiple perspectives can be reviewed, compared, and discussed. Now, where all this come from? Since the humans started overproducing information, their needs to create or to increase the capacity to memorize grown exponentially. Text was definitely an advanced method for keeping records. However, until the invention of the printing, this media was not diffused, and for this reason, the only way of possessing knowledge was memorizing. Now, this was, and I would say still is, a crucial aspect of the way humans produce knowledge. And across the years, several methods were developed for increasing these important skills. I mean, humans really, just for underline, start dealing with information, with a number of information which are far more larger than what their physicality can manage. So the invention of text allows keeping track of a larger quantity of data, and memory is the only possibility to handle, review, select all these data. However, what is the method used by humans to expand their memory and interact with a larger quantity of data? Obviously, it's creating places, virtual places, or 3D images of their storage, and they call it, passing the history, the memory palaces or the loci. I mean, a memory palace is an imaginary location, a virtual location in your mind, where you can store mnemonic images. This was, first discussed by Simonides of Chios in the 556 BC, but also in the Rhetorica Terrenium. We talk about Cicero, Giordano Bruno, Giulio Camillo, and even Mark Twain. They used to engage with this typology of techniques, transforming the information or allocating information in virtual spaces for actually finding them, for retrieving them. Probably a quick review of how humans have been imaging the impact of technology in our life and always correspond to reality. In fact, William Gibson, as well as many others discussing VR, talking now in the modern times and referring specifically to the cyberpunk, they describe this technology or technological achievement as a parallel dimension, something running in parallel and not within our real life. So a sort of a passport for a new world. And this pop culture or cyberpunk has been really affecting or influencing the way of how we in our society think nowadays to technology. This idea spread all along the pop culture, shaping the idea that the way to join the parallel world was mainly about connecting yourself with a different reality, a place where you could play a different game or joining a world ruled by different law, regulation, and where you could abandon why you are and what you are and being really someone else. Now, it is very interesting because many things in technology changed, but in reality, the narrative, the story, the metaphor is always the same. The Lone and Mower Man, have you ever seen it? It's like fantastic. This guy, we had this second life in a sense into this garage, and then he could plug inside and was in completely another world in the 80s. Tron Legacy, Tron, fantastic. They were playing an arcade game, and then if you could finish the game, actually you were projected in a different dimension. Moreover, the last remake of the movie was actually was even more interesting into this. And then matrix, you see, this was the 90s, was the time when you plug your computer into the fast net. And in fact, actually Neo, the protagonist of Matrix, he was using to plug himself, to get into another world and being someone else, or probably is real Neo. And now more recently, 2015, this is a player number one. I mean, again, very similar story, different situation, completely different life. And what this person what they do in that time is actually just placing, this time not anymore, a plug, but actually a sort of Oculus or something like that, an immersive system. So you can see, not much has changed. I mean, you have different really ages in a sense, but the metaphor is always the same, that you log into some different world where you are another person and you can actually really, creating or doing things which are not necessarily related to what you do. And now, once again, is this happening also in archaeology or in cultural heritage? Well, after some strange experiments, and I'm referring mainly to Second Life and archaeology, which more than any other virtual tool reminds the gypsum metaverse, after a phase where virtual archaeology was mainly theorized for being then used more as an illustrative tool than an interactive tool, at the very beginning of the third millennium, archaeologists start considering the virtual space as a tool for discovery. Among the first interesting discussion concerning the virtual space in support of knowledge production, we found, for example, the work of Bernard Fischer and Anastasia Dokuri-Hill, where actually they discuss, or there are collect several articles trying discussing heuristic archaeology. I mean, using these models not just for visiting a different world, but really for brainstorming and actually getting a better understanding of the real world. Forte described virtual archaeology as a static and graphic-oriented disciplines, and this was, of course, in relation of what was happening, using it just for illustration. And he said that it's incapable of providing archaeologists with the tools for simulating a potential past. And by introducing cyber archaeology, Forte shifts the focus on simulation rather than visualization, describing the disciplines, a discipline where interpretation occurs as a result of a dynamic exchange of information between the user and the users and the digital environment. Now, one of my, I would say, favorite angles on this is from Matt Hedgeworth, which he wrote this interesting paper titled From Spade Work to Screen Work, where he described the digital domain in archaeology not just as a tool for discovery, new information, but as a place of discovery. And he underlined how, for example, the use of computers for modeling and visualizing archaeological data impact the organizational and political structure of the discipline. He also argued that computer representation, mainly referring to aerial photographs and satellite images in these cases, can be used for challenging theories and ideas at the same level of tangible materials, reinforcing the idea that those have effects far behind the sphere of discovery. These are two important things here. The first one is that it's recognizing that what's happening in the virtual world as equally important, as equally impacting our understanding of the past as in the real world. And the second interesting thing is that it's not virtual archaeology or digital methods. It's not like any other archaeological science method for discovering something new. Not just for that, but really it goes behind the sphere of discovery. So actually it's something which affects our way of being archaeologists, our real practice. Dominic Posland, stressed the importance in generating 3D data as a result of a direct and non-mediated engagement with the material being recorded. All these authors underline this need to keep a connection between the digital and the physical alive, so not isolating yourself. And this seems to be, at least in archaeology, the only way to generate virtuality, intended as a fecund and a profound territory, which has the capacity of expanding the process of creation. In short, we need to keep alive the intellectual relation between us and the monument, and not just using this for isolating ourselves. Now, so far we have been through a sort of skeuomorphism of practice, right? Where we have been trying to replicate everything in 3D. This can be considered really innovative. I mean, in terms of archaeological practice, even though I think that skeuomorphism, it is indeed a natural step for moving forward. But I mean, we should not necessarily use technology for simply copying what we have been already theorized and done in the 70s. All we can say is that the real challenge is not using 3D for detecting new information, but for amplifying our capacity as a human beings to define new knowledge, a sort of like the memory palace of the logic. It is a place for thinking, a space where it's possible to take different perspectives, and most important, to gain the grand picture. Daniel Kahneman, with his seminal work, remind our limits as human beings in handling complexity, the complexity and large data sets. We rely on technology to progress in our research. And however, also we must be careful, and we can't just rely on technology only. We are led to think that everything that has a presence in the real world can be represented to a 3D model. However, the physical world consists of elements that expand far behind their shape. Representative example can be identifying, for example, we're talking about archaeological field practice, to feature interfaces, and which are crucial elements for the definition of the stratigraphic sequence, but are immaterial. And for this reason, those are very complex to represent through a 3D model alone. Another interesting example is about the archaeological deposits, which are very 3D features, which we never appreciate in 3 dimensions, if not sectioning them or exfoliating from the top. So in 2014, Christian Christiansen described the third science revolution in archaeology. Our science entered in archaeology aggressively, but also created a huge demand in terms of interpretation. I mean, specialists develop their approach within their subject, and we don't possess instruments to see this result properly contextualized in the current investigation. So we, again, as humans, do not possess the capacity to handle such a huge amount of data in one vision. So if it's complex to go through big data, image what it can be to go multiple set of big data actually referring to the same space. And this is, of course, this is a data from Star Trek. It's a big data. Yeah. What's happened when we take the virtual dimension in the field? How does this impact our work? And it is very interesting. This is the case study, for example, of Champing, where the first time we just decide to not making the model necessarily after the excavation. We want to have the models at the trowel edge. So we actually build a pipeline where we were excavating, and instead of drawing or recording with total station, we were actually 3D acquiring, having the model in the tablet before removing the context, and drawing in 3D on the context, as well as filling the description of the context directly in the field. And it was extremely interesting to see, as soon as you start connecting every single part, which could be actually all the different aspects of the trench across different years, or artifacts, or having your own collection on site, it really affect the way of how the team act or decide or perform the excavation. And the same thing was at the Cataloghuc research project, and it was extremely interesting to see how these units or how these buildings, this is not actually one model, but many different models visualizing the 3D GIS. And it was extremely interesting. You could, for example, work in one of these buildings, just reviewing eventually, if you wanted, what has been happened or how it looked like in other buildings, I don't know, excavated years before, as well as, for example, reviewing or identifying or discussing with your colleagues at the trowel's edge, multiple information, which eventually has been already removed or were not so easily detectable. You can see here, you can go diachronically also and revising the excavation, as well as actually, this is a very long, drawing in 3D on it. And there is also, using different type of tools for doing it, but also, for example, including burials. An interesting thing was the possibility of using this technique, always at Cataloghuc, allow actually also to like a puzzle, recompose elements or features of detected during the investigation, but where we actually left track or where they were. In this case, for example, on the left side on the screen, you can see this was a feature, and then it was removed by the conservation because it was in danger you have to be removed, but then it was restored, and then virtually it was possible, actually almost at the trowel's edge, to replacing the feature back and keep observing the investigation in the real place. I mean, at Chathal, but also using eventually the tablet on site for, for see how this was, how this actually was in relation to the rest of the documentation. And also, this is another interesting site. It was a collaboration with the Kalmar County Museums, and we ran an experiment together with a colleagues of mine, Ellen Wilson, an osteologist, and it's extremely interesting. We try to see, well, what's happened? This is a cold case, actually, in the Iron Age in Sweden, South Sweden. And we say, what's happened if you merge osteological method with actually field practice? And it was extremely interesting. For example, the individual in red, it was, excavated the year before, but the model was done, georeferenced. So when we excavated the rest, it was possible to drag and drop directly, the two individuals in the same space, plus the artifacts. And by customizing the database in order to host osteological analysis, the osteologists could directly report the result of each single bone, so the analysis of the bones on the 3D GIS. And it was extremely interesting because at the end, it was possible to identify patterns which were created by elements which do not exist anymore, like, for example, a collapse of the building on the bodies, creating several post-mortem fractures. It was extremely fascinating to see how many things can be highlighted actually by combining actually disciplines within, or even in archaeology. So image what can happen by also going behind that's there. Also, archaeobotany was the same things. This was an interesting project of John Hallworth, one of our MA students, and this actually he wrote a thesis, an MA thesis about it. He tried to combine the data set provided by Michael Larsson, the archaeobotanist, in a 3D GIS to see how actually different type of seeds could have, spread in 3D on the surface model of the context, which was examined. And also extremely interesting is the legacy data. In this case, we had, for example, been investigating a case which was closed in a sense already in the 18th century. It was actually excavated in arbitrary layers, so there was not much to do for what concerned stratigraphy. But recreating volumes, I mean, 3D scanning the cave, recreating 3D volumes of the spit layers created by the archaeologists, and by aligning the artifacts, retrieved and now preserved in a different museums to the different units, it was actually possible to simulating a sort of stratigraphy. So in a sense, it was kind of, I would say, incredible to see how this technology, how engaging in a different space can give you the possibility, not just with interacting with the physical space, but also interacting with the physical space years before. So it was very interesting for us as well. And now also something which has been particularly interesting is also the kind of the possibility of working with digital collections, which was particularly useful during the pandemic, for example. I mean, building, you can customize directly online buildings, which building collections, which allow you to, extracting a lot of information from high resolution artifacts with no problem of limits of polygons. I mean, 100 million usually, so this we consider it kind of fair, changing shaders, saving actually all the information about annotations and all the information about the artifacts. And most important, you see, you can recreate the narrative of it. So in a sense, you can also record the epistemological process, the way of how you as a specialist has been interacting it. But most important, you can download it, send it to your collaborator, a JSON file, and this person can just upload it in her or his own computer and see what has been your knowledge production process. The same things can be done for creating a collection, because as you know, most of the things we have online are archives or repositories. But in this case, you can select the artifacts that you want to save. You can authoring it, writing your name, describing why, and actually saving not just the artifacts, but saving the group of artifacts with all the annotation and sharing it with your colleagues or students. And now, the last slide is what has been done so far. Well, I mean, so far, what we did was really engaging in the virtual reality space and in our physical space, but all between us. So major discoveries, as Kuhn described, create new paradigms of thought. So my question is this discovery or is this approach is really creating new paradigm of thought? It is a revolution, isn't it? How should we consider all this? And, you know, an element which is really expanding this way of thinking or is adding an incredible power to this approach is the possibility of connecting each other, is the possibility of making these tools not just between, for example, me and my colleagues, but between me and the colleagues which is living on the other side of the world. So it's this opening this Pandora's box in a good way and actually connecting way of thinking, connecting creativity, connecting, sharing practice in a broader scale. And this is very significant. I like this picture. This is, you know, the last two Pope's elections. You know, we have both of them are still there, but we have, you know, in 2005, I think it was Ratzinger. You know, you can see on the bottom right of the image, there is one person taking a picture with a very old phone, and then after a few years, you know, everyone were there with a tablet, a phone, even more than one, and they were sharing this with the world. So what actually I think could be interesting would be exploring ontologies, ideas, connections, links, possibilities, which take into account not just one team, not just two teams, but the entire world. And then this is the last part, which I'm leaving to my colleague, Paola Terudas. And I just stop sharing the screen. Yes.
Here I am. So this third part deals with what happens when we use the virtual dimensions as a reflexive and inclusive space, and does this place VR offer space for other types of data? So I'm presenting here the cover of a book that was published in 2006 by Evans and Dales, and where Ezra Zubro, presenting a historical context of digital archaeology, after describing how digital technologies allow new ways to represent the real world and manipulate the data, and to transmit all of these manipulations, representation, and words around the earth at almost the speed of light to an increasingly worldwide audience, he also claims that as a result of it, archaeologists are becoming part of the increasingly widespread digital village. This village is characterized by a lack of contiguity, distance, and identity. Distance between archaeologists and their sites, and between archaeologists and their artifacts are becoming systematically less important. And then he continues, saying that a new village is defined by archaeologists, including other specialists such as geologists, palynologists, geographers, economists, etc., as well as the broad general public. And then he also adds that it is important to note that the digital village is changing at an increasingly rapid rate. So keeping this in mind, that is the idea of archaeology as a digital village where specialists working together from different parts of the globe. From 2017, we started to combine the use of 3D models with the potential of web-based visualization platforms, publishing online 3D models of some of the features excavated within projects carried out at the department. So in this slide, you see like a screenshot of what we published about the Champigny project that Niccolo mentioned before. And another example was Vestravon, another project of which we will talk a bit later. And at the same moment, new forms of digital publication dealing with the 3D content management and dissemination have recently appeared, such as the one by Sullivan in 2017 about the site of Saqqara in Egypt, or another one by Vecelottis and Mogetta and Terenato in 2017 as well, about the Mid-Republican House from Gabi, to cite just a few of these new forms of communication. And as the Department of Archaeology, from 2018, we began to focus our interest and energies on the definition of alternative forms of publication of archaeological excavations, where the narratives and archaeological interpretations play a key role. To make it, we exploited the potential of available solutions designed ad hoc for the cultural heritage sector. And in this sense, I mentioned the platform 3D Hope that allows the publication of high-resolution models. That is the platform that we used to make it possible. So three-dimensional documentation is commonly used in support of documentation, data management, and data analysis in the archaeological excavations carried out at the Department of Archaeology and Ancient History at Lund University. These huge data are stored in the servers of the faculty, and now they are available both for researchers and students. And of all our excavations, it is available an interactive visualization system that allows to navigate in 3 dimensions the context and materials retrieved. And for example, the case of Sodrastelleru, there is an educational excavation carried out for 2 years with undergraduate students. It's a well-known site for Neolithic flint mines, where the students participated and excavated Bronze Age layer. And the idea in this case, since the focus was education in archaeology, was to integrate successful pedagogical programs and approach like the problem-based learning to the use of technologies, designing and developing web-based system for educational purposes. Another aspect that we investigated within this project concerned the assessment of the effects of the use of technology, both on students' education and on teaching. So the result in this case was the implementation, the development and implementation of a web-based interactive visualization system. And the students of the course of Archaeology in Practice from 2019 and 2020 use the interactive visualization system as a supporting tool for managing and analyzing their data, and then for writing the report. Having information instantly available, as claimed by Bergen et al. In 2015, indeed enables better informed decisions and interpretation. Actually, the result of this project, of this 2 years project, has been came out as a paper that we submitted to the Journal of Open Archaeology, and me and my colleague Åsa Bergen are waiting for the editor review. Another case study where we published the data online almost instantly was Gripsunden, the flagship of the Danish King Hans that sank in 1495 after a fire very close to the island of Stora Eken in the southern archipelago of Blekinge. The underwater excavation at the site started in 2019, and it resulted in a new challenge to test our methods and technologies in a completely different environment, with different issues and conditions, but with the same need for data documentation, management, visualization, and of course, publication. In this case, this project consists on a multidisciplinary project where underwater archaeologists coming from all parts of the world took place at the excavation. So besides putting all the data, making all the data available for the participants in the excavation, there was also another goal, that is to add the semantic to the underwater surveys and offer dynamic links between geometry and knowledge. As Draft et al. Have pointed out in 2013, by creating and publishing multidisciplinary interactive narratives. Another challenge is to create a platform that is capable of promoting both on-site and off-site discussion among different specialists. And as of course, you can imagine, digging underwater is completely different than digging in terrestrial excavation. The time that you have at your disposal to make the briefing and to reason around your features is not the same. So it is very important to give the archaeologists this possibility to discuss not only on site, but also off site. So after the first campaign, we designed and implemented another interactive visualization system through which the archaeologists were able to make analysis and to access easily the 3D contents from all the parts of the world where they used to live, and also to perform some basic analysis and measurements that were necessary for writing the archaeological report. In some weeks, there will be a new investigation campaign at the site, and this will be for us the occasion to test some advancements in our systems. Vestravon is another site where we also had the chance to work in a multidisciplinary environment. And at the moment, Vestravon is a project that sees the participation of both archaeologists and linguists in a project where we are trying to also involve local community of volunteers that usually take place and help out archaeologists in the daily work. Even in this case, we developed an interactive visualization system about 2 of the 3 campaigns that took place on top of the hill. This is a very important site for Iron Age of Skåne. It has been considered a new central place. And currently, this case study is being used to test and validate a new system to which I'm currently working with. And more about this project will come as well as for the other one I mentioned before in the next months, because in the fall there will be probably a new investigation campaign to test advancements in our technologies and methods. Yes, an interactive visualization system is available, and we believe that having the opportunity to employ 3D web-based components capable of establishing and publishing a dynamic link between narrative and archaeological data provide researchers and scholars with a unique possibility of reading the data from multiple perspectives, enriching their interpretation and gaining a deeper understanding of the records retrieved by different researchers. The case study of Champinge, of which I'm going to talk now, allowed us and our colleagues the possibility to combine online data management and publication of archaeological contents within an archaeological reporting, within the archaeological process of report, and integrating a 3D visualization system. The combination of an online data management and publication of archaeological contents gave birth to a system that we called interactive reporting system. This system is a device for digitally writing, reading, and reviewing archaeological contents and materials in a non-linear way. And the result of this work that was about a 4-year excavation campaign and took some years to work with and to test this kind of system, ended up with a publication that has been just published by the Journal of Field Archaeology. So it's an open access article that you can easily find on the web. And yes, now I'm going to describe a little bit the structure of this interactive reporting system. I didn't add any video because since it is online, I invite you to navigate it by yourself. I just want to briefly explain the structure and how we created it and how it has been structured. So in this slide, you see the logical structure of the interactive reporting system. And you can see that the spatial and chronological navigation of the excavation is made possible via the space-time organization of the nodes. We have a diagram that illustrates the relationship between the different components of the interactive reporting system. Through the site node that is on the left, the user can access the various campaign nodes that you see here in this column, that are the excavation campaign that took place at the site. And through them, it is possible to access the excavation node. The dotted blue connections represent the excavation timelines, meaning that, for example, the trench 4 was excavated both in 2014, 2015, and 2016. And this keeps the connection among the different campaigns of our data. And in this slide, you see the excavation node that provides a description of the investigation project and gives the possibility to access to more information related to the investigation, like, for example, the aims of the research, the background, what was done before, and then some information added about some specific aspects of the project. In this case, since it was a Stone Age, a Mesolithic site, very important for the flint technology, there are more information about it in this section. And then the references. But moreover, what is possible to make through this node is to access the campaign nodes that you see in the bottom, campaign 2014, 15, 16, and 17. So by clicking in one of them, and this is an example of a campaign node, it was 2014 campaign, it is possible to get information about a specific excavation campaign with a description and all the documents connected to it that are accessible. These are in form of links. And then there is an interactive map that is on this part of the page where it is possible to see all the excavation area that were investigated during that campaign, and clicking on them, it is possible to access to the excavation node. Okay, I always forget to go ahead. So in this case, I'm going to describe how the excavation node, meaning the report of a specific excavation area or a specific trench, is structured. In the top left, you see that there is the header, which identifies the node. So Champinga is the name of the excavation of the site. To 2014 is the excavation, and 6 is the number of the trench. And then in the center, the main part of the screen contains the canvas. That is where the 3D models and all the 3D contents are displayed, and where it is possible to interact and navigate the 3D models. And then in the bottom part of the page, there is a panel that hosts some of the tools that allow to navigate and to analyze, to make basic measurements of the 3D contents, like taking information about the coordinates, measurements, and information about the elements that are displayed in the canvas. And then it is possible to section through different axes the 3D models, to change the lighting conditions, and to set the noise or specific orthographic or predefined view. And finally, on the left part of the report of the excavation node, you see the report, where it is possible to see the description made and the interpretation made by the archaeologists about what is described through the 3D model. So as you can see, there is also another tab, that is the scene tab, where it is possible to access the raw data, all the elements that have been used to create a specific excavation node. So it is possible to see in green the 3D models, and then in yellow the context, and then also to see the location of the finds that have been retrieved. And it is possible to turn them on, to change the visualization of the 3D models to make it transparent, or to use a solid color, and also to turn on and off the location of the finds. The pop-up window instead appears when we click on the question mark in the bottom panel and gives information about the elements. And it is possible to see through this representation that the hierarchical connections among the elements that compose the scene are kept among the different elements. Okay. The report block of the excavation node, in this case, we are in the tranche 6, campaign 2014, also includes links to external pages with the detailed 3D model of some of the finds that have been retrieved during the excavation, some of the flints that have been 3D modeled by at the department, and that we decided to use to enrich our system with all the data that we had collected. And another thing that is possible to see in the structure of the excavation node is that all the elements that have been used to compose the paragraph, or also called the blocks of report, are displayed through these buttons. And it is also possible to attach other kind of files beyond 3D models and localization of finds, like images or also documents that are visible like thumbnails. And in this case, for example, we also added another link to external resources. And in this case, through this, by clicking in this link, it is possible to access the complete collection of the finds that have been modeled and that are connected to this specific excavation site, and that are explorable autonomously beyond the navigation of the report. So to sum up, what I can say is that both the interactive visualization system and the interactive reporting system, even more, proved to be very valuable tools that allowed us to reach a deeper and broader understanding of the spatial relations among the archaeological materials encountered during the investigation, and to promote a deeper interaction with the site documentation. The development of such system proved the capacity of 3D web platforms to impact the process of knowledge production, demonstrating how the creation of web instruments designed for supporting the work of archaeologists can enrich the final archaeological interpretation. This system, in fact, allows combining various media in an interactive experience that is enriched with a narrative that is both descriptive and explicative and interpretative, and it is strictly tied with its data. Such systems have the potential to heavily affect the way that excavations are carried on and published. However, despite the positive results gained from testing this approach in a few investigation environments, and even in educational environment, because the interactive reporting system has been used by the students of Stockholm, the master students of Stockholm that were not able to participate in fieldwork, and their professor decided to use the system to make them perform like a virtual excavation, or to see the data from a virtual report. As I was saying, several aspects, anyhow, of this approach need to be further addressed and clarified. For example, the huge data that we collected and that we use to implement the interactive reporting system are actually hosted on the server at our university, at the Department of Archaeology, and technically they are available. But what happens is that they are scattered and they are neither searchable or interoperable. And we find crucial to define within our ongoing research new systems that allow us to document, analyze, manage, and publish the same data, but in a structured way. And for this reason, I show this slide that on the left side shows how our data are kept now, but with our goal to make them findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, meaning that we want to make them fair. And my collaboration with the Service Numérique de la Recherche at INHA is crucial in this sense, as I'm here also to address this new challenge. We are currently exploring the use of web tools for data structuration, harmonization, and exploitation. We are also following the FAIR principle of digital assets. And this is just a snapshot of a still ongoing work. I thank you for your attention. And I will stop sharing my screen.
So, thank you very much, Paola and Niccolò, for this amazing presentation. And although I already knew your works, I have to admit that it's always a pleasure to hear you, and you're a constant source of inspiration for us. So thank you. I just asked to Antoine if there are questions from the public.
Sorry for my English, and for the moment, no question in the chat on YouTube, but I wrote in the chat if anything, any else to ask a question.
Okay. So I can ask you, Niccolò in his presentation talked about new paradigms, and Paola in the last slide well explained that your data have so far a lack of fairness. So I think that one of the new paradigms in the web is, of course, the concept of data sharing in the web of data, in the semantic web. And so I asked to Paola, to Niccolò, if you want to stress what are you planning, or what did you plan to improve the fairness of archived data?
Okay, I will take the question because it's exactly what I'm working with at the moment. So there are several possibilities at the moment, and currently we are exploring the possibility to refer to existing ontologies and vocabularies that will allow us to make our data searchable, findable, and to be exposed according to the FAIR principle. And in this case, we started to structure our data that, in a way, we can say that within fieldwork, we can say that we had a kind of structured data, because we, as Niccolò showed in the first slide, we usually and commonly use a database to archive our data and to make analysis on them. The fact is that since we want to be part of this village, of this digital village, of this archaeology village, and to share our data, it is crucial that we keep the data structured even when we share them. And to make it, it is not possible using the software that we currently use to store our data in our database system, for example. And so we started a process of review of our database and let it be framed according to some of these ontologies, like the CDOC CRM, and the other ontologies that are appropriately designed for archaeology, and not only for cultural heritage, but exactly for archaeological excavation, like the CRM Archeo or the CRM Dig. So we started to harmonize our database according to these principles. And of course, it's not an easy task, but I think it's the good way to go through the fair, to make our data fair.
If I can construct upon this, there is also another share of responsibility that is not only on the way of how we do the data, because the thing is, if you think to how, for example, archaeology, but any other discipline is, it's investigated. It is a process. I mean, you learn at the university how to deal with archaeological data, for example, if you want to stay in archaeology. And in a sense, and I say it's a shared responsibility from now the university teacher, we need actually to start engaging with this data since the beginning, actually, because like our repositories, the new archives are on the net. So if we don't start engaging ourselves, also during the teaching, during our courses, we don't start injecting this into already the practice, the archaeological practice, we can't expect that actually people is, after graduation or during the practices in a normal job, they will use it, even though it's the most efficient or best way of creating an ontology. So I think we must have a two sides. One is actually being sure of constructing information which can be reached, but also we need to be sure that we are teaching or showing, at least speaking from my side as a teacher, our students how to do that, because otherwise the magic will not happen. So it is a skeuomorphism of practice, absolutely. I mean, new generation are much more used to engage with the digital world than what I personally am, but still, it's something that we need to do together, is a process. So on one side, responsibility of how to construct your data, on the other side, the responsibility of be sure that these platforms are not just pretty shiny islands, but actually are used on site.
Thank you for your answers. I just verify if there are other questions from the public, but I think we haven't more questions. Antoine,
Yes,
tu as une question?
Yes, I have one question. Always sorry for my English. I wonder about the articulation between the archaeological data and the consolidated information which integrated in the database, and the possible textual source about this archaeological data, this object archaeological data. My question is for the textual resource about the archaeological data, and not just the archaeological data with excavation or something else.
Yeah, I mean, Paolo, do you mind if I jump into this question? It's a very good question, because in reality, when we document in archaeology, the textual part is crucial. It's very important. And also, if we look at the process of our archaeological data are usually recorded, is not only free text. I mean, there is a specific terminology, there is a very specific number of regulations of what you should write the text. But, it is very interesting because there has been a strong discussion about alternative archives. I mean, the big limit is on the system itself. I mean, we try to be as much as consistent as possible in order to have a sort of big data approach. But on the other side, in doing so, what's happening is that you reduce the possibility sometimes of letting actually people of further constructing text connected with specific situation. So it's a sort of problem. But for example, here it comes artificial intelligence, because you can actually make mining of specific, using ontology and sentences, of specific cross-matching of specific information associated between object, in this case 3D object, and textual description on a very large archives, which describe, even using very similar terminology or language, but very different situations. It's very interesting. If you look at the way of how Pompeian archaeologists were used to describe the scene in Pompeii, where there was no pictures and so on. We're talking about the 19th century, are extremely efficient. You know, you enter the door, you see at the right side, you see this, and that. They were also methodical in the way they were actually addressing a building, in a sense. And so we are structured for describing. We have already all this. But so, as I said before, sure, we can transport this into the digital world. This can be done, but you know, we can do much more. I think we can definitely do much more. We can really, you know, be more creative or revolutionizing the way of how we look at information, which is mess up a bit with what has been, you know, in a sort of a cage so far. And we can definitely use new ontologies, new way of looking at the data, being inclusive and understanding how other specialists thought, to create something very, very interesting, which can bring us to reach understanding which we could have never done on our own. So, and this is, I think, is an interesting challenge that I definitely want to try. And but of course, collaboration, it's crucial. Otherwise, you know, no single person can really do it by itself. But I think it's interesting. There is a lot of connection, and I think Paola and Federico, especially, they're working now on this platform. You probably are addressing this or looking into this very, you know, very deeply. I think I'm so looking forward to see the result of this excellent synergetic collaboration. I hope, Antoine, I answer your question. Otherwise, just let me know. I can talk a lot, you know.
So thank you again. Really, there are wider landscape wider digital landscape that open in front of us, and we have to be ready to explore them. I thank you again for your presentation. I think we will go to the end of this session. So I will switch again in French. Donc, on va clôturer cette séance de lundi numérique, cette avant-dernière séance, si je ne me trompe pas. Je vous remercie d'avoir écouté cette séance et je vous donne rendez-vous au lundi 14 juin avec Anne Rys-Gilbert et Damien Bril, avec une intervention François-Roger Desguenières, archives numériques d'une collection. Donc, merci à tout le monde. Merci surtout au service des manifestations pour l'accompagnement et pour les supports. Et merci encore, Antoine, pour la modération de cette intervention. Bonne soirée.